Hello and welcome to another Bronte adventure. So today I'm in Haworth graveyard, as you can see, and I've decided to explore some of the residents here in the graveyard. I did a video a few months back and everyone really enjoyed it and wanted to know a bit more about some of the people that are buried here. I mean, we've got 42,000 to choose from, so good selection. The weather is very changeable. One minute it's raining, next minute the sun is out, so stick with me as we go traipsing through the gravestones. No doubt I will either get very wet or very lost. So get yourself a brew, settle down, and let's go for an explore. Here we have the grave of James, William and Timothy Feather, but it's Timothy, or Timmy as he was known, who really caught the imagination of people far and wide. Timmy became famous as the very last hand loom weaver in what people called Bronte land. Now, if you think about textiles in the Brontes' time, whole streets would have been alive with the clatter of hand looms. Men and women sat for 10, 11, even 12 hours a day at these homemade contraptions of wood and string, weaving 33-yard lengths of cloth that they would then sell to visiting agents. It was noisy, back-breaking work, but the cloth they made was tough, warm, and just the thing for keeping out those Yorkshire winters. Timmy Feather was born in 1825 and baptised by our very own Patrick Bronte himself, and he lived and worked at his loom for around about 70 years. Imagine that, 70 years of the same steady rhythm, throwing the shuttle across by hand and drawing the slave forward to beat each thread into place. Someone once worked out that he must have carried out that cycle more than 500 million times, weaving over 200,000 yards of cloth. But Timmy wasn't just a weaver, he was something of a local attraction. The village schoolmaster used to bring visitors to see him, and people came from all over the country to marvel at both the man and his house. And what a house it was, crammed from floor to ceiling with clocks, bird cages, stuffed animals, crockery, tins, ornaments, you name it, it was there. One writer said it was like stepping into Dickens's old curiosity shop. He never married, so I suppose he could please himself, and besides, in the old days, weavers often bartered for goods instead of money, so you could say his crowded cottage was really a sign of his industrialness. Timmy lived simply, porridge, oatcakes and the odd pipe of tobacco. He rarely left the area, and when old age pension was introduced, he didn't believe it was possible to get something for nout, so he refused to draw his pension for quite some time. I mean, that's Yorkshire pride for you, isn't it? When he died in 1910 at the age of 85, he really was the last of his kind, the last of the hand loom weavers. His story is one of hard work, quiet pride and a touch of eccentricity. And I think he'd be rather pleased that we're all still talking about him today. Here lies Zerubbabel Barracloth, born in 1799, eldest of 5 sons in the family famous across Haworth for their clocks. Now, I don't think I've ever seen a name quite like Zerubbabel, and that was hard to say, I can tell you. It's said to come from King Zerubbabel, the seed of Babylon, which seems suitably grand for a family of clockmakers. The Barracloths trace their craft back generations, learning the trade at a lonely farmstead called Dollymore, tucked in the Sladen Valley. They were known as the clockies of Dollymore. Great name. Making everything from long case clocks to fiddles, and even providing a bit of a local medical help along the way. Eventually, the family spread out with shops in Haworth and Thornton and Keighley and Leeds, passing down a meticulous tradition called dressing the clock, travelling to homes to service the clock in situ, often spending an entire day making sure each one kept perfect time. Zerubbabel himself inherited the Haworth home and shop. He was described as a clockmaker and hardware merchant, though later in his life he moved to nearby Oakworth and seemed to have given up the clocks. Still, his family's legacy is everywhere. A fine Barracloth long case clock still stands halfway up the staircase at the Bronte Parsonage Museum, said to have been wound by Patrick Bronte every evening before bed. Others can be found across the village, including in the old post office, quietly keeping time long after the clockmaster had gone. The Barracloth clockmaking destiny finally ended in 1958, But the care, skill and patience of Zerubbabel and his forebearers still echo in every tick and tock. And if you stand quietly in the graveyard on a still evening, perhaps you might imagine him wandering over to the parsonage to give that old clock one last careful dressing. This is the grave of Alfred Newell Binns, a master tailor from Bradford who returned to Haworth for his final rest in 1888. The stone itself is remarkable, beautifully carved with this large scroll on the front, and if you peep from behind, even looks like a section of dry stone wall. I mean, it's quite striking in this part of the graveyard. Alfred was a tailor all his life. In 1851, at just 14, he was already listed as working in the trade, lodging in Haworth with the Hartley family. By his 30s, he was married, running his own business in Hornton near Bradford and supporting a family of his own. He's one of 7 brothers, though sadly 4 of them died very young, leaving only Benjamin and William to grow into old age. The scroll on the graveyard might not just be decorative. Some suggest it represents a roll of cloth, which seems entirely appropriate for a man who spent his life measuring, cutting and stitching fabric. I mean, in this way, the memorial honours both the man and the work that defined him, a quiet nod to a life built on skill, care and craft. This is the grave of John Sager, a man whose life and deeds shocked Victorian Yorkshire. Sager, if that's how you say it, worked as a painter and a druggist and later became master of Exley Head Workhouse in Oakenworth. But it's his marriage that earned his last notoriety. When he wed Barbara Scarborough at the age of 20, life seemed full of hope. Yet over the years, their home became a scene of cruelty, violence and scandal. Barbara had 9 children, all of whom died before the age of 4, and she herself claimed that her husband was trying to poison her. Neighbours whispered of chains, beating and imprisonment in the workhouse mortuary, horrors that read like some penny dreadful plot. Barbara died and an autopsy revealed arsenic in her body, and witnesses testified that she had displayed all the classic symptoms in the weeks leading up to her death. Public opinion was convinced of Sager's guilt. He was tried at York, but technicalities and conflicting medical testimonies meant he walked free, unpunished by the law. The case caused a sensation. Details emerged of adulterous relationships, coerced lovers, and a murky network of accomplices and witnesses whose behaviour suggested a conspiracy to hide the truth. Yet, despite the suspicions, history records that John Sager returned to Bradford, married again and eventually died peacefully at the age of 78. Was he guilty? Well, the clues are compelling. Arsenic in Barbara's body, her own warnings, a history of violence and the suspicious death of their children. The court said he was innocent. History leaves the final verdict to us. Even the gravestone itself seems to bear the weight of his misdeeds, and like most here, it's crumbled and eroded far faster than its neighbours, and local rumour has it that perhaps the stone itself refuses to remember a man so widely thought to be evil. The inscription on John Murgatroyd Heaton's gravestone is unusually detailed, even given the exact day of his death. Friday, the 6th of February 1807, aged just 24. The Heatons of Pondon Hall were one of Haworth's longest established families, and their funerals were famous events known as funerals biddings, attended by friends, neighbours and king far and wide. For John's funeral, 94 mourners were summoned. On arrival at the hall, each guest was handed a long black scarf as a token of remembrance, offered wine and biscuits to stave off the winter chill, and then led upstairs to view John laid out in state in his 4-poster bed. The journey to Haworth Church was a slow, mournful procession across the frozen moors. The coffin was carried in a sling suspended between 2 marching horses, while the 94 mourners trudged behind, singing hymns in time with the swaying of the coffin. A sombre and unforgettable sight for any traveller who happened upon them that day. After the service at the church, the mourners gathered for the funeral feast, or the Arville, at the Black Bull Inn. The account from the day lists that 27 gallons of ale, quarts of port, mulled wine, rum with sugar and oranges, cold pies, tobacco, and 94 diners at 1 shilling and 8 pence each. The total for just the Arville was £7, 12 shillings and 8 pence, which is roughly about £900 in today's money. A hearty meal and a chance for the community to share stories, comfort one another, and mark the passing of the young Heaton. As the evening drew on, the mourners would have set out for their isolated farms and homesteads, hearts heavy with grief, scarves pulled tightly around their ears, footsteps echoing across the frozen, moonlit moor. Perhaps they hoped it would be many years before another Heaton funeral bidding requested such a journey, yet the memory of John Murgatroyd Heaton and his remarkable day would linger in Haworth for generations. The inscription on this gravestone is a lesson in ambition, self-praise. James Greenwood of Bridge House, who died in 1824, aged 61, took 51 words to tell the world how honourable he had discharged his duties as husband, father, friend, and a Christian. When his wife Martha followed him in 1831, she managed a whopping 94 words of glowing tribute to her own life of domestic and social virtue, philanthropy, and piety. By the time the eldest son, poor John Greenwood, was added in 1833, there was barely room left. He had just 38 words to record that he'd been a dutiful son, affectionate brother, and a generous master, living in the esteem of all and dying in humble faith. One can only imagine the poor stonemason perched on the grave in wind and rain and bitter Yorkshire cold, chiselling away at all those words. I really do hope he charged by the word. This gravestone remembers several members of the Constantine family, though not all are actually buried here. Nathan Constantine rests here with his wife, Rebecca, and his later wives, Alice and Mary. Several of their children also commemorated, including Isaac and Nathan, whose lives would take them far from Haworth. The youngest son, Isaac Constantine, began life as a bank clerk in nearby Keighley, and at 19 published a modest collection of poetry, Flowers of My Spring. In 1847, like many of his generation seeking a new life, he emigrated to Canada. During the voyage, ship fever claimed the Anglican clergyman on board, and Isaac unexpectedly took on the duties of minister for the remainder of the journey. Settling in Canada, he served faithfully for 42 years as the minister of Stanbridge East Diocese in Montreal. One can't help but wonder whether the young Bronte sisters, growing up in Haworth at the same time, would have known Isaac, who was just a few years older than Charlotte and Emily. His older brother Nathan pursued a career in music, becoming a professor of music in London. He actually found his final resting place in the famous Highgate Cemetery. Though two of those commemorated here lie elsewhere, the gravestone quietly preserves the story of a family whose lives stretch from Haworth across the Atlantic to Canada and into the hearts of London's musical life. It stands in the shadow of the parsonage, a silent witness to a family of ambitious, creative and far-reaching lives, all rooted in the same village on the edge of the moors. This gravestone commemorates Dr Amos Ingham, a respected physician in Haworth, along with several members of his family. Born on the 22nd of June 1827, Dr Ingham established his medical practice in the village in the early 1850s. Just 3 years later, he was summoned to attend one of the most famous patients, Charlotte Brontë. In her 38th year and weakened by pregnancy, Charlotte's illness proved fatal, and despite his care, Dr Ingham was unable to save her. This event remained a defining and deeply regretful moment in his career. Dr Ingham married Mary, born 28th of January 1828, and the couple had several children, including Hannah Maria, or Maria, depends how you say it, their daughter, who sadly died young, and John William Foster, who continued the family line. Tragedy and loss were reoccurring themes for the family, and as reflected in the gravestone, which also commemorates Guinevere Marjorie, the beloved daughter of John and Florence Ingham, who died just 24 years old. In 1870, Dr Ingham had built Ashmount, one of Haworth's most striking homes. Its Gothic style reflects not only his wealth, possibly bolstered by an inheritance from his father-in-law, but also his taste and standing in the community. Similarly, his gravestone bears the mark of love for design. Ornate and thoughtfully crafted, it remains one of the more decorative memorials in the graveyard, a fitting tribute to a man whose life was entwined with both the care of his patients and the character of the village he served. As I walked through the graveyard, I couldn't help but stop and admire some of the beautifully carved stones. The detail in the work is astonishing. Delicate patterns, scrolls, flowers and symbols, all carefully cut into the stone nearly 2 centuries ago. It makes you think about the incredible skill those stonemasons must have had, chiselling every curve and line all by hand. Their craft has left us with gravestones, and not just markers of lives, but work of art in their own right. Even after all these years, the beauty of their workmanship still speaks across the centuries. I had to show you this one, and I'm sure it goes unnoticed all the time. This is on the actual pathway that hundreds of thousands of people walk along every year. It's amazing that you can still see the detail. If you've been in Haworth recently, you might have noticed that the clock on the church of St Michael's and All Angels has stopped for some time. Many people have wondered why we haven't heard the famous bells calling out on the hour, so I decided to find out. The Reverend Ollie Preston was kind enough to update me on the situation, and it turns out that a while ago some masonry in the church tower had come loose. That was repaired, but unfortunately it seems the damage had allowed the water to seep into the clock mechanism itself. For a while no one realised, but the water eventually caused the clock to seize up. An expert was called in to take a look, and the verdict was the entire mechanism needed to be stripped back to reach the damaged section. As you can imagine, that's not a small job, and there was some concern about the cost. Luckily, the insurance company has agreed to cover it, though of course, as with most insurance claims, it hasn't been a quick process. The good news is that everything has now been approved, and a specialist clockmaker, or the clockman as I keep calling him, is due to begin the restoration work very soon. While the mechanism is being repaired, an electric winder will also be installed. At the moment, the clock has to be wound by hand using a large handle, a bit like a crank that they used to use to start old cars. To get to it, you have to climb right up into the tower, which is cramped and a little bit dangerous, and it has to be done every 6 days or so to keep the clock running. That did make me wonder, though, whose job it was to climb up there and wind the clock originally. I mean, I've got this image of some nimble lad, perhaps an apprentice, being sent up into the tower to keep the hands moving and the bells ringing. So, although it might take a little while yet, we do look forward to hearing the sound of the church bells striking the hour across Haworth again really soon. And when it does, perhaps we'll appreciate it all that more, knowing the effort, paperwork and careful restoration it took to bring it back to life. So I'm just about to leave, and I was putting my microphone away and walking out and walking down the path and not really paying much attention to anything around me. And I've just jumped out of my skin because behind me, under that tree, as I was walking along, I thought there was someone there. You know, I saw it in the corner of my eye. I thought I saw somebody there. So I did a double take and there was nobody there. That is just really spooky. And to me, it looked like someone sat with their knees to their chest. It just really freaked me out. And now I'm kind of paranoid that there's something there and I can't see it even in the camera. So, yeah. I think it's time to go home or get a really strong cup of tea. But yeah, spooky. Just shows, doesn't it? You just don't know what's out there. Oh, goodness me, it's starting to rain, so I'm sheltering under a tree and I put my raincoat on. But this is British summers for you. 1 minute the sun is out, the next minute the rain's coming, so you just cannot predict what's about to happen. I hope you enjoyed wandering around the graveyard with me today, exploring some of the residents, you could say, that are here. There's so many stories to learn about these people that are buried just beneath the surface. It's so fascinating, this social history side of it. I mean, we know so much about the Brontës, and yet the everyday people that are buried in here, we just don't know that much about them. So I don't really have 3 questions for you today, but what I would like to know, have you been here? Have you been to Haworth graveyard? And is there any particular grave that really stood out? Was it the infant grave down at the bottom? Or was it just a grave that you came across whilst walking around? Let me know. I'd like to hear what you think of this place. Also, how do you feel about when you're here, about walking over the graves? Is it just me, or do you find yourself saying, excuse me, pardon me, sorry, don't mean to stand on you? Is that just me? But I always feel really guilty. I mean, where I'm stood right now, I really feel like I'm stood on somebody, and I've already apologised to them and explained what I'm doing. I'm sure they don't mind. But yeah, let me know. Have you been here? How do you feel about stepping on the graves? That does interest me. So I hope you enjoyed coming with me. I am soaked through. My feet are sodden, but I haven't really got the best footwear on, so it's my own fault. If you like this video, please do that whole likey, subscribey thing, because it really does help me out and it lets YouTube know that we want to watch more Bronte content. So have a good weekend, and I will see you the Friday after next for more Bronte adventures. Take care. Bye.